Welcome to the sleeping mind and body. This space is designed for rest and gentle learning. You don't need to pay attention or remember anything. Simply listen and let your body settle. If you fall asleep, the video has done exactly what it was meant to do. Night arrives the way a shadow lengthens across a room. Not as a sudden switch, and not as something to finish or accomplish, but as a quiet change in timing. The world outside becomes less bright, less insistent, and the nervous system tends to notice. The brain, always listening for patterns, begins to respond to the softer rhythm of evening. Signals that once felt sharp and urgent start to lose their edges. The overall pace becomes a little slower, not because anything is being forced, but because the conditions have changed. In the daytime, the brain often runs on quick comparisons. It measures sound against sound, motion against motion, light against light. It keeps a wide field of attention, scanning for what might matter next. As night settles in, the environment offers fewer new details to track. Colors fade into simpler tones. Distances become harder to judge. Small sounds stand out for a moment and then dissolve back into quiet. And gradually, the brain begins to favor quieter signals, slower timing, longer pauses between one moment of noticing and the next. This shift is not only a matter of mood. It is woven into the way the nervous system coordinates itself. Networks that support alert focus and rapid response can become less dominant when the outside world grows dim. Other networks, those associated with inward attention, with memory, with imagination, with the gentle wandering of thought, can feel more present. It can be subtle, almost like the background of the mind moving a little closer, while the foreground steps back. As light fades, attention often narrows. During the day, awareness can feel outward-facing, stretched toward many points at once. In the evening, it may become more centered, less interested in distant possibilities. The brain's map of the world is still there, but it may stop updating so quickly. There is less pressure to keep every detail in place. What remains is a simpler sense of here, a smaller circle of what seems relevant, and a larger area of what can be left alone for now. Inside the brain, timing matters. Neurons communicate in rhythms, in coordinated patterns that can speed up or slow down depending on context. Night tends to bring a gentle recalibration of those rhythms. The fast, high-alert patterns that help with active problem-solving and constant monitoring may become less frequent. In their place, slower patterns can begin to appear more often, signals that support steadier, quieter states. It is not that the brain becomes inactive. It is that it begins to choose a different kind of activity, a less outward kind. The body participates in this change as well. As evening deepens, many people notice that muscles no longer hold the same readiness. The posture of the day loosens in small ways. Breathing can become less tied to immediate demands. The heart continues its work, reliable and steady, but the overall tone of the system can shift away from readiness and toward maintenance. The nervous system contains many channels, and at night, it often gives more space to those that support restoration and internal balance. Hormones and chemical messengers also follow their own nightly patterns. Melatonin, for example, tends to rise in the dark for many people, quietly reflecting the time of day to the brain and body. It is not a command, and not a dramatic signal. It is more like a dimmer switch in the background, a gentle indicator that the hours of lower activity have arrived. Alongside it are many other changing signals, small adjustments in temperature, in metabolism, in the way cells coordinate their repair. The language of the body becomes softer, more internal, more about keeping things stable. As sensory input decreases, the brain is given a particular kind of space. During bright hours, perception arrives in constant streams. Faces, text, movement, traffic, conversation. The brain filters these streams, deciding what deserves attention. At night, there can be less to filter. The visual system receives less brightness and less contrast. The auditory system hears fewer layered sounds. Touch may be limited to stillness, fabric, air. With fewer incoming messages demanding interpretation, the brain can reduce the effort of staying oriented to the outside world. This is one reason thoughts can begin to change their texture in the evening. Thought during the day often has edges, plans, lists, questions, unfinished shapes that want resolution. At night, those edges can soften. A thought may appear and fade without needing to become anything else. Images can drift through. Words can arrive with less urgency. Even when the mind is active, the activity can feel different, less like aiming, and more like floating. Emotional intensity often follows a similar pattern. Emotions do not disappear at night, but they may become less tightly linked to action. The nervous system can begin to interpret the world as less demanding. With fewer cues that call for quick response, feelings may spread out, becoming quieter, more diffuse. The same memory that felt sharp earlier can feel farther away now, as if viewed through dimmer light. The brain's centers for threat detection and vigilance remain capable, but they may not be receiving the same kind of fuel. The overall message becomes gentler. Fewer alarms, fewer urgent interpretations, more room for safety. Safety, in the nervous system, is not an idea as much as a state. It is reflected in the way signals travel, in the way muscles hold or release, in the way attention moves. In a calmer nighttime environment, the brain often has more evidence that it can ease. It can spend less energy on prediction and defense. It can allow longer pauses. It can permit stillness without needing to fill it. This easing is gradual. There may be moments of wakeful clarity mixed with moments of drifting. The brain does not need to choose one state immediately. Instead, it can hover between them, letting the balance shift little by little. Awareness may become less defined at the edges. Time can feel less segmented. Minutes may be harder to count. The mind can move from one topic to another without the usual sense of consequence. And beneath all of this, the brain continues its quiet housekeeping. Even before deeper sleep arrives, systems begin to reorganize their priorities. Some circuits reduce their communication with the outside world. Others begin to coordinate internally, linking experiences, sorting impressions, loosening the grip of the day. This is not a dramatic transformation. It is a soft drift toward a different arrangement, one that asks less of conscious attention. Nightfall in the nervous system is, in many ways, the nervous system remembering an older rhythm. Light and dark, activity and stillness, scanning and settling. The brain, sensitive to these cycles, begins to lean toward the slower half of the day. Signals become quieter. Timing becomes longer. Attention becomes narrower, more inward. And through this gentle shift, alertness can ease without effort, carried by the simple fact of night arriving, and continuing, moment by moment, in its own calm direction. As night settles in, the world often begins to feel farther away. Sounds are still present, but they can seem less sharp, less immediate. A passing car becomes a soft shape of noise, then fades. The house has its own quiet language. Small creaks, distant hums, a steady rhythm that does not ask for attention. Even when a sound is clear, it may not carry the same urgency it carried earlier in the day. It can simply be part of the background, arriving and leaving without needing a response. Light changes, too. The brighter signals of daytime give way to dimmer tones, and the brain receives fewer strong visual messages. Shapes become simpler. Contrast softens. Edges are less insistent. In lower light, the mind does not gather quite as many details from the environment, and the visual world becomes more impressionistic, more suggestion than definition. Things can look familiar while also looking gentler, as if the scene has been simplified into what matters most. Touch can take on the same distant quality. Fabrics against the skin, the contact of a pillow, the steady weight of a blanket. These sensations remain, yet they may become quieter in the mind. The body still receives information from pressure and temperature, but there is often less need to interpret every signal. Sensation becomes less like a message and more like a steady presence. The physical world is still here, but it does not have to feel busy. This softening is not only in the room, it is also in the brain's way of selecting what to notice. Throughout the day, attention is frequently pulled toward changes, new sounds, sudden movement, anything unexpected. At night, the balance often shifts. The brain's filtering can become stronger, not by force, but by a natural narrowing of focus. Fewer details rise to the level of importance. Many small inputs remain untagged, unmarked, allowed to pass through without being shaped into meaning. In the waking hours, perception can be full of quick interpretations. A sound becomes a label. A flash of light becomes a decision. A sensation becomes a question. As night deepens, those quick interpretations may slow. The mind can begin to leave things unnamed. A noise can simply be a noise. A shadow can simply be a shadow. A feeling can simply be a feeling, without needing to become a story. The brain is always sorting, always deciding what belongs in the foreground and what can remain behind. At night, the foreground often becomes smaller. The background becomes larger. It is not that the senses switch off, but that the brain is more willing to let sensory life remain in soft focus. Like turning down the volume on a crowded room, the overall signal feels calmer even if the room has not changed. This is one of the quiet ways nighttime supports a sense of safety. When fewer details feel important, fewer details demand a reaction. The mind can rest in a world that seems less urgent. The nervous system often prefers steadiness to surprise, and nighttime tends to offer more steadiness. Less movement, fewer voices, fewer bright shifts of color and sound. With reduced stimulation, the brain can spend less energy scanning and more time settling. Inside the brain, the flow of information continues, but the gates can narrow. Sensory pathways still bring in sound and touch and light, yet the higher centers that build a detailed, alert picture of the world may become less active. What stands out is often what is simple and consistent: a steady fan, a gentle pulse of distant traffic, the quiet pattern of breath, the even feeling of warmth. The mind does not have to chase after every small change. Even meaning can become simpler. During the day, objects and places are layered with associations. A desk may carry a list of tasks. A phone may carry a collection of messages. A clock may carry a schedule. At night, those meanings can loosen. Things return to their basic shapes. The mind can see a room as a room, not as a set of obligations. The brain becomes less interested in complexity and more comfortable with the plain fact of being here. This simplification can feel like the edges of the world are softer. Not blurry in a troubling way, but softened, as if the brain is choosing not to outline everything in bold lines. It is common for awareness to become less pointed and more spacious. Attention can drift rather than lock on. The mind may notice something, then let it go, then notice something else, without needing to hold it tightly. The chemistry of night quietly supports this shift. As darkness increases, melatonin levels often rise in the body, not as a command, but as a gentle signal that the timing has changed. Alongside this, many alerting signals ease back. The overall tone becomes more receptive to stillness. The brain does not have to work as hard to maintain the bright, detailed clarity of daytime consciousness. With fewer sensory demands, the brain can turn inward more easily. This inward turn does not have to feel like thinking. It can feel like a loosening. The mind can hover in that place where images appear and fade, where thoughts are quieter and less structured, where the boundary between noticing and dreaming becomes thinner. External sound may still arrive, but it may be woven into the background of inner experience, no longer needing to be decoded. Sometimes a sound does stand out for a moment. A door closing far away, a sudden change in the wind, a brief voice from outside. And then, often, the brain checks it, recognizes it as non-urgent, and lets it drift away. Filtering does not mean never noticing. It means deciding, again and again, that most things can be allowed to pass without becoming a focus. In this way, nighttime perception can resemble a dimly lit landscape. You can still sense where you are, but you are not required to map every detail. The mind is free to be less exact. It can move in wider strokes. The world becomes a quiet outline rather than a list of sharp points. Reduced stimulation continues as a calm condition in the background. Less light, fewer sounds that carry meaning, less movement to track. The body remains in contact with the environment, but the contact is steady, almost repetitive. The brain receives enough information to feel oriented, yet not so much that it needs to stay on guard. It is a gentle balance, aware, but not watchful. And as the night continues, the distance can grow. The outside world becomes even more muted, as if it is farther down a hallway. Sensations become softer and less defined. The brain keeps filtering, quietly choosing simplicity. Edges remain gentle. Meanings remain light. In this quieter sensory space, the mind can float without effort, supported by the steady absence of urgency, held by the ordinary calm of nighttime signals arriving more slowly, asking for less, and fading more easily. As night settles in, wakefulness doesn't usually end all at once. It begins to thin in small, ordinary moments. A thought starts, then slows, then loses its edge. Attention rests on something simple, and then it quietly lets go. There may be tiny pauses in the stream of thinking, brief blanks that feel almost unnoticeable, like a sentence fading before it reaches its last word. The mind is still present, still aware, and yet it becomes less eager to define everything. In the waking day, the brain often moves quickly from one point to the next. It compares, checks, predicts, and updates. It gathers detail and keeps a running map of what matters most. At night, that pace can soften. The rapid switching becomes less constant. The small jumps between ideas become fewer and less sharp. Neural activity continues, steady and alive, but the chatter can become quieter, less crowded. A single thought may stretch out, then loosen, then drift away without needing a clear ending. There can be moments when focus feels slightly wider, and slightly less exact. Sounds are still there, but they may arrive with less urgency. The edges of sensation can become smoother. What would have demanded a quick label earlier, "What is that? Where did it come from? What should I do?" may now pass through awareness more gently, without pulling the mind into a response. The brain still receives information, still recognizes patterns, yet it can do so with a calmer kind of attention, one that doesn't insist on immediate meaning. In this gentle drift, time can begin to change its shape. Minutes may feel longer or strangely brief. The mind may notice a moment, then notice another, and the space between them is not always counted. Instead of a clear sequence, experience can become more like a slow surface, smooth and slightly blurred. There is still a sense of now, but it is less tied to measurement. The usual markers, before and after, next and then, can soften until they feel less important. The brain is always active, even in rest, but nighttime activity tends to organize itself differently. During wakefulness, many networks coordinate to keep attention narrow and precise, to hold goals in place, to filter distractions and keep the self feeling defined and ready. As night deepens, those networks can ease their grip. The brain does not stop working, it simply changes its tone. Activity becomes less driven by urgency and more shaped by quiet maintenance. The inner world becomes more spacious, with fewer demands for exactness. In this space, it can be natural for thoughts to arrive in fragments. Not every idea needs to be completed. A memory might appear as a single image, then dissolve. A plan might begin to form, then lose detail, as if the brain has decided it can be unfinished for now. The mind can become less interested in solving. Not because anything is wrong, and not because something has been achieved, but because nighttime is a different setting. One where the nervous system gradually shifts towards safety and ease. You might notice how the emotional tone of thinking can change as well. During the day, emotions often come with speed and clarity, connected to decisions and outcomes. At night, feelings can become softer around the edges. They may still be there, real and present, but less sharp, less likely to demand immediate interpretation. Even when something carries weight, it can feel quieter, as though the brain is holding it with a lighter touch. The same memory can seem less urgent when it is no longer surrounded by daytime stimulation. This softening is not a rule, and not a requirement. It is simply a common rhythm. When light decreases and the environment becomes still, the brain's internal signals begin to change. Melatonin, one of the hormones associated with night, rises in a gentle curve for many people, not as a switch but as a subtle message that the world is dimming. Body temperature trends slightly downward. The pace of many internal processes becomes slower and steadier. These shifts are often quiet enough that they can't be pinpointed, but they can be felt indirectly, as a general easing, a lowering of intensity. As the drift continues, the sense of self can become less rigid. The mind may not need to rehearse its story so actively. Inner narration can thin, leaving more silence between words. Some moments are filled with a simple, floating awareness, present, but not focused on doing. The brain does not have to keep scanning for what's next with the same sharpness. It can allow experience to be less organized, less accounted for. Neural chatter, in this phase, can resemble a room gradually emptying. Not abruptly, but one conversation at a time becoming quieter. The brain's tendency to jump quickly between tasks can slow into fewer, longer arcs of attention. Instead of constant switching, there may be long stretches where nothing much happens, and that is enough. Even curiosity can feel different, less like reaching outward, more like gently noticing what is already here. And then there are those micro moments that feel like slipping through a small gap. A blink becomes a little longer. A thought disappears midstream. There is a half second where awareness has no object, no sentence, no image. It is not dramatic. It can be so mild that it seems like nothing happened at all. And yet these tiny blanks are part of the natural drift, like brief quiet pockets opening in the mind. In those pockets, the need for certainty often fades. The mind can become less exact. It doesn't have to name every sensation, or pin down every idea. It can allow things to be vague. It can let a question remain a question, without pressing for an answer. Nothing needs to be solved in order for the night to continue. The brain is still capable of clarity, still capable of focus, but it can also be capable of leaving things unfinished, resting in the incomplete without discomfort. Time continues to smooth out. The boundary between one moment and the next becomes less defined. The brain's internal clock keeps its quiet rhythm, but awareness doesn't always track it closely. A sound might seem far away, even if it's near. A memory might feel close, even if it's old. The mind may move through impressions the way it moves through shadows, without needing to measure their distance or explain their shape. This is how wakefulness often loosens its hold, through soft repetition, through slowing pace, through attention becoming broader and less precise. Neural activity remains steady and protected, shifting into patterns that support rest. The mind becomes lighter, less determined to complete each loop. Thoughts can be simple or fragmented, or absent for a while. And in that quiet drift, the brain can begin to do what it does so naturally at night, settling, balancing, reorganizing without urgency, held within the calm, familiar rhythms of darkness and stillness. As evening settles in, the brain often begins to notice a different kind of light, a different kind of sound. Not always as a clear thought, and not always as a feeling that can be named, but as a subtle shift in the background. The day's sharp edges tend to soften. The sense of immediate urgency, so common in daylight hours, often becomes less insistent. Attention can still move from one thing to another, but it may do so more slowly now, as if the mind is willing to let moments pass without holding them so tightly. Inside the body, chemistry also tends to change in quiet ways. One of the signals often mentioned is melatonin, a naturally rising nighttime messenger that becomes more present as darkness grows. It is not a command, and it is not a switch. It is simply part of the evening environment within the body, a gentle indication that night is arriving. For many people, melatonin levels tend to rise gradually, as if the brain is adjusting the tone of the inner room, dimming what felt bright and turning down what felt loud. This change does not require effort. It is closer to weather than to willpower. The brain and body often follow an internal timing pattern known as circadian rhythm, a steady cycle that continues whether it is being noticed or not. Circadian rhythms are like an ongoing timekeeping system, built into many tissues and systems. They influence when alertness tends to crest and when it tends to fall, when hunger signals often appear, and when rest begins to feel more natural. Even on nights when sleep arrives easily, and on nights when it arrives in fragments, the rhythm itself still quietly continues, marking time in a soft and consistent way. As evening chemistry gathers, the nervous system often shifts toward a lower setting. Arousal levels tend to ease down from the day's pace. Not in a dramatic drop, but in small adjustments. The body leaning towards stillness, the mind becoming less quick to react. The muscles may hold a little less tension without being asked to. The jaw may unclench for a moment and then return, and then unclench again. The eyes may blink more slowly. These changes can be so subtle they barely register, yet they are part of the body's ordinary way of moving toward night. Body temperature also tends to follow a nightly pattern. In many people, core temperature gradually drifts downward as the evening deepens. It is a small change, measured in fractions, but it can influence the feeling of the night inside the skin. Warmth and coolness become more noticeable. The body often prefers a quieter thermal landscape at night, as if its systems are preparing for slower work, for maintenance that happens best when the outside world is less demanding. In the brain, waking activity often begins to reorganize. During the day, networks involved in focused attention frequently stay active, scanning, selecting, responding. As night comes on, that kind of tight focus can become harder to sustain, not as a failure, but as a natural loosening. Thought may still move, but it tends to wander more easily. Ideas may arrive without needing to be solved. Memories can float up with fewer reasons attached to them, like pages turning in a book that is no longer being studied. The senses often change their priorities as well. Sounds may still be heard, but they can feel farther away. The mind may register them without building a full story around them. The same can be true of light, of small movements in the room, of distant activity outside. The brain continues to receive sensory information, yet it often becomes less motivated to interpret everything as important. The meaning of things can become less sharp. The edges of awareness may blur slightly, and the center of attention may no longer insist on being held in one place. This is one way the evening can feel safer, not because nothing is happening, but because fewer things feel urgent. The brain tends to reduce its readiness to respond. Systems that were tuned for quick decisions begin to slow their tempo. There can be a growing sense that the world is allowed to continue without constant monitoring. In that softer setting, emotion often changes character. Feelings may still be present, but they can lose some of their intensity. Worry can become less pointed. Excitement can become quieter. Even sadness, when it appears at night, may feel more distant, as if it is being held at arm's length by the dimmer light of the evening mind. Circadian timing supports this shift in many overlapping ways. Hormones and neurotransmitters tend to follow daily and nightly patterns, rising and falling with a slow regularity. Melatonin is one part of that pattern, and there are others, each with its own gentle curve over the hours. Together, these signals shape the internal atmosphere. The balance between alertness and drowsiness, between readiness and recovery. None of this needs to be forced. It often unfolds on its own, like a familiar routine that the body remembers without thinking. As night continues, the brain often becomes more comfortable with incompleteness. Tasks left unfinished may still be remembered, but they can feel less solvable in this dimmer state, and therefore less demanding. The mind may revisit pieces of the day in a quieter form, not as a replay with full color and sound, but as softened impressions. A conversation might return as a vague outline. A face might appear without detail. A moment might be felt without the need to label it. The shifting chemistry of evening can also influence the way the brain connects one thought to the next. Associations become looser. Images can blend. The boundary between memory and imagination can thin. This is not unusual. It is part of how the brain transitions away from the linear structure of daytime thinking. The mind becomes less like a spotlight and more like a wide, gentle glow, illuminating things without insisting on their importance. Underneath all of this, The body often continues its quieter adjustments. Heart rate can slow a little. Breathing patterns may become more regular. Digestion tends to move into a calmer rhythm. The overall level of activation in the nervous system often decreases, as if the body is conserving its energy for the long, low work of the night. The muscles, the immune system, the endocrine system, and the brain itself all participate in this change of mode, each in its own way, each on its own timing. Even when awareness remains present, the evening chemistry keeps arriving. Circadian rhythms keep time. Temperature drifts. Arousal eases. Melatonin quietly rises and then holds its place for a while, like a dim lamp in the background. Thoughts may still come, but they often arrive more slowly now, and they often leave more easily. The night does not require sharpness. It tends to welcome softness. And the brain, in its natural rhythm, often begins to match that softness, settling into a calmer pattern, moment by moment, without needing to try. Early sleep often feels like a gentle threshold, not quite wakefulness, not quite dreaming. The brain is still present, still listening in its quiet way, but it no longer holds everything in a tight, organized frame. The steady, daytime style of thinking begins to loosen. Attention becomes less like a spotlight and more like a soft glow, spreading out, dimming at the edges. In this lighter sleep, thoughts may still appear, but they arrive differently. A sentence might begin and then drift away before it finishes. An idea may form without needing to be explained. The mind does not insist on keeping every piece in its proper place. The usual feeling of cause and effect becomes less important, and the simple fact of something appearing, an image, a word, a memory, can be enough. The brain, always active in some form, begins to change its pacing. The quick scanning of the day quiets down. Sensory information is still there, but it is no longer treated as urgent. Sounds from the room may be noticed and then released. The body's signals continue in the background, steady and familiar, without demanding interpretation. It can feel as though awareness is still hovering nearby, but not gripping anything closely. Lighter sleep often carries a particular kind of thinking, looser, more fragmentary, more like scattered pages than a single story. A memory from earlier might surface, and then, without warning, be replaced by a face from years ago. A place might appear vividly for a moment, even if it makes no logical sense in the present. The brain is not trying to construct a clear narrative. It is simply allowing pieces to rise and fade, as if they are being gently sorted without needing to be labeled. At this edge of sleep, logic softens. The mind does not have to defend its arguments or keep track of time. The ordinary rules of sequence, first this, then that, begin to lose their firmness. A small detail can become the entire scene. A feeling might exist without a clear reason. The brain's storytelling systems continue to flicker, but they do not insist on coherence. They create a kind of drifting collage. Small moments, brief impressions, half-formed scenes. Sometimes these fragments feel dreamlike, even before a full dream begins. An image may arrive with the smooth certainty of a dream, and yet it may dissolve instantly, leaving only the sense that something was there. A voice might be heard internally, not as a full conversation, but as a trace. The mind can move from one piece to another without any need to explain the transition. This is also a time when awareness can float in and out. There may be a moment of clarity, remembering the room, the bed, the simple fact of night, and then the clarity thins again. The brain can briefly check in, and then sink back. It is not a problem to be solved. It is simply the natural rhythm of early sleep, where consciousness becomes lighter, less defined, more willing to release control. In the background, the chemistry of night continues its quiet shift. Hormones that support nighttime timing, including melatonin, tend to rise in dim conditions, helping the brain recognize that it is safe to lower its alertness. This does not feel like an announcement. It can feel more like a gradual easing, a subtle permission for the mind to stop holding itself upright. The brain's networks begin to communicate in a slightly different way. During the day, many systems work together to maintain focus, plan, and respond. In early sleep, that coordinated effort becomes less strict. Some regions remain active, some settle, and the overall pattern grows less linear. The mind can still generate thoughts, but those thoughts are often lighter, less deliberate, less tied to decision-making. Memory begins to behave differently, too. Instead of retrieving information for immediate use, the sleeping brain can allow memory fragments to appear without needing to do anything with them. A color, a hallway, a familiar gesture, the feeling of a specific afternoon. These pieces may come without any emotional charge, or with only a faint echo. They can be present for a moment and then replaced, as if the mind is turning a slow kaleidoscope. Even emotions, when they appear here, often feel softened. The sharp edges of the day tend to round off. A worry may try to take shape, but it may not find the same structure it had earlier. Without the usual mental energy that builds a strong storyline, the feeling may loosen and fade. The brain is still capable of emotion, but it is less likely to amplify it. In the quiet of early sleep, intensity often becomes less organized, less persuasive. There can be brief moments where the mind seems to catch itself, almost waking, almost thinking clearly, and then it slips again. This gentle instability is common at the beginning of the night. Awareness is not locked into one state. It can hover. It can dip. It can return and then drift away, over and over, with no need for a firm boundary. The sense of self can become lighter as well. In waking life, the brain constantly updates a model of who you are, where you are, what you are doing, what comes next. In early sleep, that model becomes less detailed. The future stops pressing forward. The past stops lining up neatly. What remains is something simpler. A quiet presence, a loose collection of impressions, and the soft background of the body resting. A dream may begin here as a simple image, not yet a world. A staircase that goes nowhere. A hand holding an object you cannot quite name. A room that is familiar and unfamiliar at the same time. The brain does not correct these inconsistencies. It does not demand a map. It allows the mind to move through gentle uncertainty, where meaning can be vague and still feel complete. And in that vagueness, there is often a sense of safety, not because anything is being fixed or achieved, but because the brain is reducing urgency. It is lowering the volume on the signals that usually insist on action. With less stimulation and less demand for response, the nervous system can settle into a quieter mode. Thoughts can become like distant lights, appearing briefly and then fading into the dark. This lighter stage of sleep can feel like a slow loosening of the mental grip. Not a sudden drop, but a gradual unthreading. The mind can still form words, but they may come out oddly, rearranged, softened. It can still create stories, but the stories do not hold together for long. They do not need to. They can remain unfinished. In early sleep, the brain is not aiming for clarity. It is letting clarity dissolve. It is letting fragments exist without forcing them into order. Awareness can rise like a bubble and then disappear again, leaving behind a calm, open space where the next moment does not have to be defined. And as the night continues, this loose, floating quality can return again and again. Soft thoughts, scattered images, gentle gaps, each one arriving without urgency and passing without needing to be understood. In the deeper part of the night, the brain often settles into a slower kind of activity, a rhythm that feels wide and unhurried. The electrical patterns seen at this time can look like long, rolling waves, moving steadily across large areas rather than flickering in small, quick bursts. It is a form of slow wave activity, broad and synchronized, as if many distant regions are keeping time together. The pace is not sharp or urgent. It is even, repeated, and simple, like a steady tide. In this wide rhythm, there is usually less room for the fine, busy details of waking thought. The mind is not shaping plans or tracking the edges of each sound. Instead, mental noise tends to thin out. The quick commentary that can fill the day becomes quieter, and what remains is more basic and less defined. Sensations may feel simpler, more like gentle pressure and warmth than clear images or clear sentences. Awareness can become spacious, sometimes present, sometimes absent, without needing to choose one or the other. Deep sleep is often described as a time when the brain's activity becomes more uniform, less fragmented. In waking life, many networks compete for attention, switching rapidly between inner thought and outer input. Here, the switching slows. The brain's signals can appear more coordinated, with fewer sudden jumps. There is a sense of reduced complexity, as if the system is resting in a stable pattern rather than constantly rearranging itself. The internal world becomes quieter, not empty, but sheltered. The body, too, tends to move in a slower tempo. Breathing is often more regular. Heartbeat can feel farther away, as though it is happening in the background rather than at the center of experience. Muscles commonly hold a heavier stillness, and the outlines of the body can seem less sharp. The mind may register only broad impressions. The weight of limbs, the steady contact with the surface beneath, the muted drift of warmth and coolness. These impressions do not insist on interpretation. They are simply there, and then they fade, and then they return. Across the brain, slow waves can rise and fall in repeating cycles. This does not mean every moment is identical, but there is often a theme of steadiness. The waves are sometimes described as alternating between more active and less active states, like a gentle pulsing of readiness and release. In the quieter moments of the cycle, many neurons fire less often, as if the brain is allowing brief pauses. In the more active moments, signals gather again. Together, these changes can create a feeling of deep heaviness, the kind that comes with being held by a consistent rhythm. In this state, the boundary between thoughts and sensations can become softer. A stray idea may appear, but it may not develop into a full story. A hint of a memory may surface, but it may not carry the sharp emotional color it had before. The mind can touch these fragments lightly, without gripping them. Images may come and go in slow motion, or not appear at all. There is space around everything, a quiet distance that makes each impression feel less urgent. Nighttime hormones follow their own subtle patterns, and melatonin is often present in higher amounts during darkness. It is part of the body's familiar night chemistry, one of many signals that accompany the lowering of alertness. Alongside it, other internal processes shift in their own steady way. Temperature regulation changes slightly. The balance of fluids and salts continues, quietly monitored. The immune system carries on its background work, not as a dramatic event, but as a calm, ongoing presence. In deep sleep, these processes are not felt as actions. They are simply part of the sheltered interior of the night. There can be a sense, in deep sleep, that the world has moved farther away. External sounds may still exist, but they often arrive softened, filtered through layers of reduced attention. The brain's usual scanning for meaning is less active. The need to label and respond is not as strong. The environment becomes less demanding, and the nervous system often treats the moment as safe enough to remain in stillness. Even when a sound is noticed, it may pass through without forming a chain of reaction. The slow wave rhythm is sometimes described as restorative, but in practice it can feel like nothing in particular. Restoration is not always something that can be sensed. It may be more like a quiet maintenance that continues without needing awareness. Cells repair what they can. Tissues renew their balance. Energy use shifts. The brain and body do what living systems tend to do when the pace is lowered and the night is long. It happens without announcements, without a clear marker, without a moment that says, "Now it is working." It is simply the background hum of life, softened. Memory, in the deeper layers of sleep, may be handled in a calmer way. Experiences from the day can be replayed in altered form, or sorted without images at all. Some patterns are strengthened, others are allowed to fade into less importance. It can be like placing papers into folders without reading every line, or like smoothing a surface so the sharpest ridges do not stand out as much. What was intense may become quieter. What was scattered may become less scattered. Not as a deliberate effort, but as a natural settling. Emotions often lose some of their edge in this wide stillness. The brain's threat detection systems do not disappear, but they may take a softer posture. The night does not demand the same fast judgments. Feelings can become less pointed, more like distant weather than immediate instruction. Even if the mind brushes against something tender, it may do so with a kind of muffled gentleness, as though the night is placing a thin blanket between experience and reaction. In deep sleep, the sense of self can become simpler. The running narrative that says, "I am here, doing this, thinking that," can loosen. Time can feel less like a line and more like a quiet pool. Moments do not stack in the same way. There may be no clear beginning to a thought, and no clear end. Just a slow drifting, sometimes into nothing that can be remembered, sometimes into faint impressions that dissolve before they take shape. The imagery of deep sleep often returns to heaviness and steadiness. A wide rhythm moving across the brain. A body resting with fewer signals rising to the surface. A sheltered interior, dim and quiet, where complexity recedes. The night holds to its repeating patterns, not hurrying, not insisting. The brain continues its slow wave motion, like a low, distant ocean, and the mind remains free to be undefined, to be quiet, to be less than it was during the day, and still complete. And so the deep night continues in this broad, steady way. Less noise, less urgency, fewer sharp edges. A calmer background of internal care, unremarkable and constant. A wide stillness that returns again and again, wave after wave, steady and sheltered, as the brain rests in its simplest rhythm. In the quiet hours of night, the body continues on in a steady, unannounced way. Not as a project, and not as a performance, but as a kind of ongoing maintenance that has always been there. In the dark, when movement is less frequent and the outside world asks for less, many of the day's faster demands soften. The pace inside the body often becomes slower, more even, and less reactive, as if attention has been gently returned to the background. Across the skin, the muscles, the lining of the gut, and the small structures that hold everything together, renewal continues in subtle rhythms. Cells are replaced and repaired in ways that do not need to be noticed to occur. Tiny tears from ordinary use may be met with ordinary rebuilding. Proteins are assembled and adjusted. Fluids shift, settling into familiar pathways. The body does not announce each quiet correction. It simply keeps going, keeping its own internal records, making small changes that add up to stability over time. The immune system also remains present through the night, not as an alarm, but as a watchful pattern of communication. Cells signal to one another in chemical phrases, passing information, comparing notes, standing down when there is nothing urgent, and remaining ready when there is. The sense is not of a battle, but of a steady patrol, a soft monitoring that can become more noticeable only when it has to. At night, with fewer interruptions, this kind of internal attention can feel less scattered, more contained, as though the body has more room to keep things orderly. Metabolism, too, often settles into a quieter mode. The constant turning of fuel into motion and heat continues, but it can take on a more measured tempo. Heartbeat and breathing may become more regular. Blood pressure commonly drifts downward. Temperature can shift slightly, following the nighttime curve that the body has learned across many evenings. Hormones that mark daylight and activity begin to change their levels, not as commands, but as gentle indicators of time, like a dimming of internal lights. Melatonin is sometimes described as the hormone of darkness, though it behaves less like a switch and more like a signal that night has arrived. As evening deepens, melatonin levels tend to rise, offering the brain and body a consistent message. The environment is quieter now, and the patterns of rest can begin to unfold. It is not a force, and it is not a guarantee. It is simply one part of a larger nighttime conversation, a natural marker that helps the nervous system move towards slower rhythms. Inside the brain, maintenance also continues, quietly, alongside the softer landscape of sleep. During waking hours, the brain is busy with incoming information, constant adjustment, and the fast choreography of attention. At night, as sensory input diminishes and the mind is less tethered to the immediate world, there can be more space for internal housekeeping. The brain's support cells, along with the movement of fluid through brain tissue, participate in gentle cycles that help clear away byproducts of the day's activity. This process is often compared to a kind of cleaning, though it is more accurate to imagine it as flow. A slow, repeating circulation that keeps the environment of the brain in balance. These housekeeping rhythms do not feel like anything in particular. They do not announce themselves with a sensation that demands attention. They happen in the background, like many of the body's most essential processes. The brain continues to regulate its chemistry, to recalibrate signals, to restore the conditions that allow neurons to communicate with less strain. Night is not a time when the brain stops working. It is a time when its work becomes quieter, less outward-facing, and more concerned with maintenance than with response. As sleep deepens, neural activity often becomes more synchronized, with large groups of neurons shifting into slower patterns together. Electrical rhythms can become more pronounced and more regular, like waves spreading across a calm surface. In these slower patterns, the brain's energy use changes. Urgency eases. The constant scanning for what comes next becomes less dominant, and internal systems are given a chance to operate with fewer competing demands. This is also a time when memory can begin to settle. Experiences from the day, the fragments of conversation, the shapes of places, the emotional tones of moments, may be revisited in altered form. The brain does not replay the day like a recording. It reorganizes. It sorts, groups, trims, and connects. Some details fade naturally. Some impressions remain and find their place among older memories. In dreaming, the mind may create scenes that feel unfamiliar, yet still carry the texture of what has been lived. Even without vivid dreams, memory processes continue in a quiet way, with networks strengthening or loosening as the brain decides what to keep active and what to let rest. Emotions, too, can soften in this nighttime environment. During the day, feelings often arrive with context, with consequences, with the bright edges of immediacy. At night, many emotional signals become less sharp. The brain regions that help detect threat and urgency may become less dominant, while other networks take on more of the work of integration and cooling down. This does not mean every feeling disappears. It simply means that the mind has a different kind of space around feeling, a wider margin, where intensity can become less tightly held. The body's repair is often most noticeable by its quietness. There is no need for effort, because the systems involved have been practicing for a lifetime. Tissue renewal continues whether it is being observed or not. Immune activity continues whether it is being thanked or not. The brain's clearing and recalibration continue without needing permission. Restoration, in this sense, is not a dramatic event. It is a supportive condition created by stillness, reduced stimulation, and the gentle timing of internal clocks. Even the idea of healing at night can be held softly, not as a promise, and not as a result that must occur in a particular way, but as a general tendency. When the environment becomes safer and quieter, the body often uses that calm to attend to itself. When the brain is less occupied with interpreting the outside world, it often turns inward, adjusting and maintaining. When the pace slows, small processes have room to complete their cycles. And these cycles repeat. Night after night, the same familiar patterns return, slightly different each time, yet recognizable. A gradual dimming of alertness, a loosening of attention, a settling of metabolism, a steady, background restoration that does not need to be directed. The body continues its maintenance with patience. The brain continues its quiet housekeeping with steady rhythm. And all of it happens in the background, without strain, without urgency, and without any requirement to follow along. In the darkness, there is often less to respond to, and so the systems that spend the day responding can become less tense. The mind becomes less defined around particular thoughts. The edges of awareness may blur and sharpen and blur again. And beneath that shifting surface, the quieter work continues. Small repairs, gentle clearing, soft recalibration, unfolding in their own time, in their own calm, as night holds steady around them. As the night continues, the day does not disappear all at once. It lingers in small pieces, in fragments of conversation, in a glimpse of light on a wall, in the feeling of walking through a familiar room. And somewhere beneath the surface of quiet rest, the brain begins to handle these pieces in its own gentle way. Memory, at night, can be thought of as becoming less like a stack of separate moments, and more like a soft collection that is being calmly reorganized. Not with urgency, not with effort. Just as a natural part of what the sleeping brain tends to do when the noise of the day has faded and attention is no longer held to the outside world. In the waking hours, experiences arrive quickly. They are sharp at the edges, tied to the exact place and time where they happen. They can feel bright, immediate, sometimes loud. But later, in the steady darkness of nighttime rest, those same experiences often begin to lose their sharpness. The outlines soften. The details become less demanding. The memory is still there, yet it becomes quieter, more distant, less insistent. Inside the brain, there are different regions that hold different parts of an experience. One area, tucked deep within the brain, is often associated with keeping track of new events, where they happen, when they happen, and what was connected to what. Another set of areas, spread more broadly across the surface, is associated with long-term storage, meaning, and the wider web of what a person already knows. During sleep, these areas can be understood as spending time in a kind of nighttime conversation. Not a conversation made of words, but of patterns, subtle activity that repeats and echoes, as if the brain is gently revisiting what has been lived. The newer memory traces can be quietly brought forward, then laid back down again, as older networks receive them and begin to make room. It can be like a careful sorting, done in dim light. Some things are kept close. Some are filed more loosely. Some are allowed to fade without being forced away. And this sorting is not always neat or obvious. It can be partial, drifting, and incomplete, as sleep itself can be partial, drifting, and incomplete. In this resting state, the brain does not need to hold everything at full intensity. There is less sensory input arriving, less demand to respond, less need to decide what matters right now. And when right now becomes less important, the mind can begin to treat the day differently, not as an immediate situation, but as material that can be placed into a wider story. Sometimes the sleeping brain seems to replay small pieces of experience. A short sequence, a simple movement, a phrase that was heard, a feeling that passed through the body. These pieces may return not as clear scenes, but as softened impressions. They can appear in dreamlike forms, or they can occur without any dream awareness at all, only as quiet signals moving through a resting system. And through these repeated, muted reappearances, memories can gradually become less tied to their original setting. They shift from being vivid and specific to being more blended with what is already known. The day's learning becomes less like a bright note played alone, and more like a tone that has been absorbed into the larger music of the mind. A new memory, early on, can feel like a separate object, easy to point to, easy to locate. Later, after time in sleep, it may feel less isolated. It may become harder to identify as that exact moment, because it has been woven into other memories, other meanings, other associations. It is still present, but more integrated and less sharp at the edges. This is one of the quiet ways the brain tends to protect a sense of inner steadiness. When experiences are intense, the waking mind can hold them tightly, almost as if gripping them. Nighttime rest offers a different kind of holding. Not gripping, but cradling. Not pushing away, but allowing distance. In that distance, emotional intensity often becomes less immediate. The same memory may still matter, but it can feel safer to carry when it is no longer blaring at full volume. Some emotional tones are softened simply because the body is in a different mode. Heart rate slows. Breathing becomes quieter. Muscles are less ready for action. Hormone rhythms shift into a nighttime pattern. The brain's chemistry changes in subtle ways, including the natural rise of melatonin in darkness, which is often associated with the body's sense that it is time to be inward, time to be less alert to the environment. In that inward state, memories can be revisited without the same intensity of urgency. The brain can approach them indirectly, through fragments and echoes. It can allow the feeling to be present without requiring a response. And as these patterns repeat in a softer form, The emotional charge of some experiences can gradually become less sharp, less immediate, less likely to spark sudden alertness. The mind's attention during sleep is not focused the way it is during the day. It is wider, looser, and sometimes absent altogether. Yet the brain continues. It continues to maintain the body, to keep the internal environment stable, to cycle through its phases of rest. And in the background, it continues this quiet rearranging, placing recent experiences into longer-term context, letting some details fall away, keeping what fits. This kind of memory settling can feel, from the inside, like nothing at all. There may be no clear sign that it is happening. The person sleeping may drift through dreams, or through blankness, or through half-awareness where thoughts are thin and slow. And still the brain is active in its own quiet manner, repeating patterns, adjusting connections, smoothing the day into something less jagged. And when wakefulness briefly returns in the night, when the mind stirs for a moment, it may notice that certain thoughts have changed shape. What felt urgent earlier may feel farther away. What seemed complicated may feel simpler, not solved, but less tightly held. Not because anything has been forced into place, but because the mind has had time to loosen its grip. The same idea can come around again and again. While awareness rests, the mind rearranges quietly. While the outer world is dim and still, the inner world finds a slower rhythm. While attention is no longer pulled from moment to moment, memory can settle, reorganize, and soften in its own natural time. And night after night, in small ways that do not need to be noticed, the brain tends to keep doing this. It revisits. It sorts. It blends. It lets some things become more distant, more integrated, more gently stored. It leaves room for tomorrow by placing today into the wider landscape of the mind. There is no need to witness it. No need to follow it. The process is not asking for effort. It belongs to the quiet biology of nighttime, steady, unhurried, and calm. The mind can drift. Awareness can fade, and beneath that fading, memories can continue to settle, becoming softer, becoming quieter, becoming part of something larger and less defined. As night settles in, the emotional world often changes its texture. What felt sharp in the day can begin to feel less pointed. Not necessarily solved, not necessarily gone, but quieter at the edges. The brain's alert systems, so useful in daylight, tend to lower their volume as the surroundings grow still. Signals that once carried urgency may arrive more softly now, as if they have farther to travel through the dark. In waking hours, emotions can rise quickly, linked to movement, noise, faces, messages, and the constant hint that something might need a response. The brain is skilled at scanning for meaning and importance, and it can treat small changes like they matter right away. At night, with fewer demands coming in through the senses, that scanning begins to slow. Attention is less tightly held to the outer world. The mind does not have to keep checking, comparing, preparing. And in that quieter setting, emotional charge often eases in a gradual, ordinary way. There is a natural shift in the balance between networks that watch for threat and networks that support reflection and context. The alarm-like patterns that help the body mobilize, quick pulse, tight focus, readiness, are less often called upon in the dark. The chemistry of wakefulness, with its bright and forward momentum, becomes less dominant. In its place, nighttime rhythms bring a different atmosphere. Slower, more inward, less insistent. Feelings can still appear. Memories can still flicker. But they may do so with less heat. A thought that would have triggered a chain of reactions earlier may now pass like a dim shape in the distance. Even when something emotional returns, it can feel less like a command and more like a passing weather pattern. Present, noticeable, and then already shifting. As the brain moves deeper into sleep, this softening often continues. The boundaries of thought become less defined. The mind does not hold experience with the same tight grip. There is less need to label everything, less need to decide what it means. Awareness, which in daytime is pointed and task-shaped, begins to spread out and thin, becoming more like a wide, quiet field. At times in the night, REM sleep arrives, one of the phases where dreams can become vivid, detailed, and strangely alive. In REM, the brain can be active in its own internal way, while the body remains largely still. Muscles are kept quiet, as if the physical world is gently placed on pause. Behind closed eyes, images and scenes may form with a sense of motion, emotion, and story, even as the room stays calm and unmoving. Dreams in REM do not always follow logic. They can combine fragments of memory, recent impressions, older feelings, familiar faces, and places that never quite existed. The brain is not trying to perform for anyone. It is simply expressing patterns, linking one moment to another, letting the mind wander through its own landscapes. Sometimes the emotional tone of a dream can be intense, and sometimes it is light, drifting, even forgettable. And often, whether the dream is remembered or not, it fades on its own, leaving only a trace. Through the night, emotional experiences can feel as though they are being smoothed, gently handled by a mind that no longer needs to react in real time. During the day, emotion is often tied to action. Speak, move, decide, protect, pursue. At night, action is not required. The brain can revisit impressions without the same demand to respond. In that sense, feelings can be held differently, not with force, but with distance and quiet space around them. There can be a subtle change in how personal everything feels. Worries may lose some of their sharp specificity. Embarrassments may become less bright. Anger can loosen its hold. Sadness can become more like a muted tone than a hard weight. This does not mean the mind is erasing anything. It is more like the mind is allowing experience to settle into a broader background, where it can exist without pressing so close to the surface. In these nighttime hours, the brain's communication with the world is reduced. The ears still hear, but the meaning of sound is less urgent. The skin still senses temperature and pressure, but those sensations rarely become a call to act. The eyes remain closed, and the visual system rests from the constant work of interpretation. With fewer inputs asking for a decision, the brain can spend more time in its own internal rhythms, moving gently between quiet depths and lighter dreaming. Natural nighttime signals move through the body as well. Melatonin, often described as a darkness-related hormone, tends to rise when the light is low, supporting the sense that it is time for rest. Other systems follow their own circadian patterns, temperature, heart rate, and breathing often becoming slower and steadier. Nothing about this needs to be forced. It is simply what many bodies do when the environment becomes calm and the day releases its grip. Safety, in the brain, is not only an idea, it is a state. It is the absence of repeated alarms. It is the reduction of urgent cues. In the stillness of night, that state can become easier to access. With fewer signals demanding attention, the mind can stop rehearsing, stop scanning, stop bracing. Even if life contains uncertainty, the immediate moment can feel less charged, as if the nervous system is being given permission to lower its guard. This quieter state does not erase emotion. It changes the way emotion is carried. feelings can become less like sharp edges and more like soft shapes. They can be present without needing a response. They can drift through awareness and fade into the larger dark, where the brain continues its slow, private work. And if wakefulness returns briefly, if a thought rises or a memory taps the surface, it may do so without the same force it had earlier. Nighttime wakefulness often has a different character. Less crisp, less certain, less driven. The mind can hover between clarity and dream, between naming and not naming, between caring and letting go. The emotional system, so active in daytime, is often less dominant here, less likely to turn every signal into a story. In the background, the brain continues to shift through its phases, each with its own rhythm. Quiet non-REM periods with deeper stillness. Lighter periods where dreams may begin to appear. REM periods where imagery and feeling can move freely while the body rests. Over and over, in a gentle cycle, with no need to keep track. The night holds these changes without announcing them. What remains, underneath it all, is a sense of lowered urgency, a slowing of mental pace, a softening of intensity. The world outside does not ask as much. The world inside does not have to answer as quickly. In that reduced exchange, the brain can settle, and the emotional tone can become less demanding, more diffuse, and easier to carry. The night continues, steady and unhurried, and the mind continues its quiet motion, sometimes dreaming, sometimes blank, sometimes lightly aware, while the body stays still, and the signals of alarm become fewer, farther apart, and less insistent. As the night continues, sleep often moves in gentle cycles, drifting between lighter moments and deeper ones, and then returning again. It is not a straight line, and it does not need to be. The brain has its own quiet pattern for the dark hours, a repeating rhythm that can feel almost like tides. Sometimes awareness floats near the surface, and sometimes it settles farther down, where time feels softer and less defined. In lighter sleep, the mind can still carry a faint outline of the day. A fragment of a thought might pass by. A distant sound may be noticed without fully arriving. The brain remains present, but in a reduced way, with less urgency attached to what it senses. Neural activity continues, steady and alive, yet more restrained, as if the mind is speaking in a lower voice. Attention does not grip as tightly. It loosens, and the world becomes less sharp around the edges. Then, without needing to be signaled, the brain can sink again into deeper sleep. In these deeper phases, activity becomes slower and more synchronized across wider areas, like many regions settling into a shared, unhurried pace. Awareness is not absent so much as it is far away, dimmed and quiet, no longer tracking the passing moment. The body continues its nighttime maintenance in the background, with breathing and circulation following calmer patterns, and muscles often resting with less tension, simply because they are no longer being called on. These shifts can repeat many times across the night. Lightness, depth, a gentle return, a soft descent. The brain does not stay in a single state, and it does not have to. Even in healthy rest, sleep can include small ripples of wakefulness, brief returns of thought, quick impressions that rise and fade. A half-remembered image. A sense of turning over. The mind noticing itself for a moment, and then letting go again. The night holds all of it without requiring anything from it. If a thought returns, it can be there briefly, and still the larger rhythm continues underneath. The brain's nighttime chemistry keeps shifting in the background, with hormones and neurotransmitters changing in quiet balance. Melatonin remains part of this landscape, associated with darkness and the easing of alertness, present like a dimming of the internal lights. Other systems adjust as well, not dramatically, but steadily, as if the body recognizes night as a different kind of environment. Across the cycles, memory and emotion can begin to feel less solid. The mind, which during the day may arrange everything into clear stories and firm meanings, tends to loosen its grip at night. During certain phases, recent experiences can be replayed in subtle ways, not as deliberate reflection, but as quiet reorganization. Details may be sorted and linked, important pieces kept closer, and the rest allowed to fade into the background. It can feel as though the brain is gently filing impressions into calmer places, where they no longer demand immediate attention. Emotions, too, often change their texture through the night, not necessarily disappearing, not being solved, but becoming less intense, less sharp. What felt urgent earlier can become muted, as the systems that heighten alertness soften their activity. The brain's threat detection networks may become less reactive, and the sense of inner alarm can quiet, simply because the night tends to reduce stimulation and expectation. In the dark, the mind is less often asked to respond, decide, interpret, or defend. There is more room for neutrality. And still the cycles continue. In lighter sleep, the surface of awareness may return for a moment. A small thought can appear, like a leaf on water, and then drift away. The brain may briefly approach wakefulness, adjusting position, noticing the room, sensing the passage of time without naming it. These moments do not interrupt the night's rhythm. They are part of it, like small waves that do not change the tide. Then deeper sleep may return again, bringing a heavier quiet. The boundaries of the self can become less distinct. Language becomes faint or disappears. The mind is less concerned with sequence and explanation. In this deeper stillness, the body continues its quiet repair. Tissues renewing, immune signals shifting, energy stores balancing, all in a slow, ongoing way. It is not a performance, not a task being completed. It is simply what living systems do when they are given darkness and relative safety. At other points, dreaming sleep may come and go, bringing movement behind closed eyes, a different kind of brain activity that can be vivid from within and yet oddly weightless afterward. Dreams can gather fragments, faces, places, feelings, and arrange them without the usual rules. The waking mind might try to make sense of them later, but during the night they can simply arise, unfold, and dissolve. Even when dreams are bright, the body often remains still, held in a protective quiet that keeps motion minimal while the brain explores its private inner space. Through all of this, the night remains steady in its own way. It does not ask for continuous depth, and it does not require uninterrupted blankness. It allows for returning thoughts, for shifting comfort, for brief awakenings that feel like small clearings in a forest. And then the path drifts back into shade again, unforced, natural, and repetitive. The brain's rhythms keep time without needing attention. Electrical patterns change as sleep changes, sometimes faster and lighter, sometimes slower and broader. The chemistry of alertness rises and falls. Body temperature subtly shifts. The sense of the outside world becomes distant, not because it is being resisted, but because the brain is turning inward, reducing the volume of incoming information, narrowing what it has to process. Even the idea of time can lose its edges here. Minutes do not have to be counted. Awareness can come and go in soft intervals, like a lantern seen through fog. There may be moments of knowing, and then moments of not needing to know anything at all. Nighttime rest is often like that. more circular than linear, repeating rather than progressing, with no demand for a particular kind of experience. And so the cycles continue, lighter and deeper, shallower and quieter, with space for everything that naturally appears. Thoughts may return, and then thin out again. Sensations may briefly sharpen, and then soften. The brain keeps moving through its nighttime patterns, held by darkness, held by reduced stimulation, held by the simple steadiness of being at rest. Nothing has to be finished for the night to go on. Nothing has to be resolved for the mind to drift. The rhythm is already there, repeating in the background, supporting the slow rebalancing of body and brain, the gentle settling of memory, the easing of emotion, the quiet maintenance that continues and continues as the night quietly holds its changing, familiar flow.